Have you ever stopped to think about how many truths have been spoken without a single word being uttered? You know that moment when someone simply looked into your eyes and you understood everything, absolutely everything, without needing an explanation, or when you yourself remained silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because silence seemed to carry more weight, more sincerity than any sentence could express. Yeah, silence speaks, and sometimes it screams. Now tell me something, honestly. When was the last time you chose to remain silent and then realized you had made the right choice? Or did you ruminate, thinking you should have said something? As we talk here, I want you to recall those moments in your life, those moments when silence appeared, whether as a friend or as an annoyance. Because today we will explore together something that has always accompanied each of us, but that we rarely stop to truly understand. Silence is not empty. It never has been. It's full of meaning, of untold stories, of emotions that quietly overflow. And for those who have lived so much, been through so many situations, met so many people, and held so many secrets in their hearts, understanding silence is like finding a key that opens doors we never knew existed. I'm going to share with you something psychology has discovered over many years of studying how we communicate, how we relate, and most importantly, how what we don't say can be as important as what we do say. There are at least 6 different forms of silence. Each has its role, its function, its right moment to appear. Let's start with reflective silence. You know when you're faced with a difficult decision? The kind that will impact your life, your family, your future. You can't make a decision impulsively. You need time. You need to be with yourself in silence, letting your thoughts organize themselves like someone tidying a messy drawer. It's in this silence that things begin to make sense. I remember conversations I've had throughout my life where, in the middle of everything, I simply stopped talking. Not because I had nothing more to say, but because I needed to process it. I needed to feel the weight of what was being said, to understand the layers beneath the words. Have you ever experienced this? That moment when you needed to stop, breathe, and let the silence work for you? This kind of silence isn't weakness, quite the opposite. It's strength. It's maturity. It's having the courage not to rush into an answer just because someone is waiting. Anyone who's lived long enough knows that some answers take time to mature, like a fine wine. And forcing this process only spoils the result. Now there's another kind of silence we've all used at some point. Silence as a defense. This is the kind that appears when we feel it's not safe to speak, when the subject is too sensitive, when we fear being judged, when we know our words could be used against us or against someone we love. How many times have you remained silent at a family gathering because you knew that if you opened your mouth, it would turn into an endless argument? How many times have you kept an opinion to yourself because you realized the other person wasn't ready to hear it? This isn't cowardice. It's wisdom. It's understanding that not every battle needs to be fought, that not every truth needs to be spoken the moment we think about it. Defensive silence protects us. It protects our feelings, our inner peace, our relationships. It creates a safe space where we can calmly decide whether or not it's worth exposing what we feel. And often, after a while, we realize it wasn't worth it. That silence was the best choice. But be careful. There's a huge difference between using silence as temporary protection and using silence as a way to eternally escape from problems. It's one thing to give it time, so it's another to sweep things under the rug and pretend they don't exist. Healthy silence is the kind that serves as a pause, not a definitive escape. Moving forward, we have the silence that facilitates self-knowledge. This one is profound. It's the silence you seek when you need to truly find yourself. You know when life is too busy, when everyone wants something from you, when obligations pile up and you feel like you're losing touch with yourself? It's at this moment that silence becomes a bridge between who you are today and who you were in the past, a bridge between your hopes and your fears. When we are silent, without distractions, without the television on, without idle conversations, we begin to hear our own inner voice. And this voice has much to say. It speaks of regrets that still hurt. It speaks of joys that left their mark. It speaks of dreams that were realized and dreams that fell by the wayside. And the more we live, the more we are. Our inner voice has much to teach us, as long as we give it space to emerge. Have you ever taken some time just to be with yourself, doing absolutely nothing, just feeling, just remembering, just organizing internally what life has disorganized externally? This kind of silence is rare these days, but it's essential. It brings us back to ourselves. Now comes one of the most beautiful silences there is, empathic silence. This is the silence of true companionship. You know when someone you love is suffering, and there are no words to comfort them. When anything you say would sound false, insufficient, or even invasive. That's where this silence comes in. Empathic silence doesn't try to fix things. It doesn't try to explain. It doesn't try to lecture or offer ready-made solutions. It's simply there, present, validating the other person's pain by its mere presence. It's a silence that embraces without needing arms, that consoles without needing lectures. How many times has someone just needed you to be there, by their side, without saying a word? How many times have you needed this yourself, and deep down been grateful that that person had the sensitivity not to fill your head with cliches and advice you didn't even ask for? This silence creates connection. It says, I'm here, I care, you're not alone, and I respect what you're feeling too much to try to minimize it with empty words. It's one of the most profound gestures of love and friendship there is. And speaking of connection, there's also the silence expressed through the body. This is fascinating. It happens when words fall silent, but the body speaks volumes. A look that lingers a second longer than usual. A discreet, almost shy smile loaded with meaning. A hand reaching for another hand. A hug that needs no explanation. Our body has its own language, and it's often more honest than any speech. You can control your words, choose what to say and what to hide, but the body gives it away. It shows tension, shows affection, shows discomfort, shows truth. Anyone who's been with someone for a long time knows this silence. They know how to read between the lines of gestures. They sense when something isn't right, even if the other person says everything is fine. They sense when there's true joy, even if the words are few. This kind of silent communication is the fruit of intimacy, of shared time, of genuine attention to the other. Have you ever noticed how a simple touch can say more than 1,000 words? How a look can convey a complicity that no conversation could ever express? This bodily silence is powerful because it doesn't pass through the filter of reason. It comes straight from the heart, from instinct, from the purest truth that exists within each of us. And we come to the last type, silence as a communicative response. This is interesting because often people don't understand. They ask something, expect a verbal answer, and when you remain silent, they interpret it as if you have nothing to say. But that's not quite the case. Sometimes silence is the most complete answer you can give. It can mean I'm thinking carefully about what you said, or I'm not sure yet and I'd rather not lie with a hasty answer, or even this question is so profound that it deserves more than quick, superficial words. In therapeutic processes, for example, silence plays a fundamental role. It gives the person space to explore their own thoughts without being interrupted, directed, or rushed. A therapist who knows how to use silence allows the patient to find their own answers, rather than offering pre-packaged solutions. And in everyday life, this silence also has its value. When someone shares something important with you, remaining silent for a few seconds before responding shows that you're taking it seriously, that you're truly considering what was said. It's a sign of respect, of genuine attention. Have you ever stopped to think about how modern society rushes to fill every second with sound? The television on all day, the radio in the car, music in headphones, incessant conversations, cell phone notifications. It's as if we're afraid of silence, as if it were an uncomfortable void that urgently needs to be filled. But the truth is the opposite. Silence isn't empty. It's full. It is full of possibilities, reflections, and genuine connections. It is in silence that great ideas are born. It is in silence that relationships deepen. It is in silence that we rediscover ourselves. For those who have lived so many years, gone through so many phases, seen so much change around them, silence can be an old friend, a trusted companion who has always been there, offering wisdom, offering rest, offering clarity when everything seemed confusing. Think about the wisest people you've ever met. Did they talk all the time? Or did they know when to be quiet, when, if I'm just listening, when can I let silence do the work that words couldn't? There's immense beauty in learning to live well with silence, in not being afraid of it, in not feeling the need to fill every pause with unnecessary words. Some of the most profound conversations we have are those where silences are as important as the words spoken. And in relationships then, silence can save marriages, friendships, and family bonds. Knowing when to keep quiet avoids unnecessary arguments. Knowing how to offer empathetic silence strengthens bonds. Knowing how to use reflective silence before making decisions protects against future regrets. But silence can also hurt when used incorrectly, when it becomes indifference, when it becomes punishment, when it's used to chastise someone, to make them feel invisible or unimportant. That's not the silence we're talking about here. That's toxic silence, the kind that hurts and distances. Healthy silence is the kind that respects, welcomes, gives space, and protects. It's never a weapon. It's always a bridge. Now I want to ask a question you may never have asked yourself before. If you could go back to a time in your life when you chose to remain silent, would you make the same choice? Or would you change? Was there ever a time when you should have spoken and didn't? Or a time when you should have kept quiet and instead talked your head off? These questions have no right or wrong answers. They exist only to make us think, to help us better understand who we are and how we relate to the world and the people around us. Silence ultimately is a choice, and like every choice, it has consequences. It can bring peace or it can bring regret. It can strengthen or it can distance. It depends on how, when, and why we use it. And here's something important. There is no instruction manual. Every situation is unique. Every person is different. What works in one moment may not work in another. That's why wisdom isn't about having fixed rules about when to speak and when to remain silent. Wisdom is about developing the sensitivity to perceive what each moment calls for. Have you noticed how over the years it's become easier to understand these nuances? How have you learned to better read situations, people, and moments? This is experience. This is life lived. And silence is part of this learning journey. There's something beautiful about reaching a stage in life where we no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone, where we don't need to speak just to be present, where we can simply be, with or without words, and that's enough. Silence teaches us humility. It teaches us that we don't know everything, that we don't always have the right answer, that it's okay not to have control over everything. It teaches us to listen more and talk less. It teaches us that sometimes the best contribution we can make is precisely to not contribute more noise. And there's also the silence of solitude, which is different from shared silence. This is the silence we experience when we're alone, whether by choice or circumstance. It can be a heavy silence, filled with longing, memories, and absences. Or it can be a light, restorative silence that recharges our energy. For those who have lost a loved one, silence takes on new meanings. It begins to occupy the space where once there was a familiar voice, a familiar laugh, a constant presence. And learning to live with this silence is one of the most difficult challenges anyone can face. But even then, silence can be an ally. It can be the place where we keep memories alive, where we converse internally with the departed, where we feel their presence in a different but no less real way. It's a sacred, intimate silence that no one on the outside can fully understand. Now, thinking about your daily life, your ordinary routine, have you ever tried simply stopping everything for a few minutes and being silent? No television, no radio, no cell phone in hand, no reading, nothing. Just you and the silence? Try doing that today. Set aside 10 minutes. Sit comfortably, close your eyes if you like, and just be there. Don't try to force your thoughts. Don't try complex meditations. Just be, breathe, feel. You'll notice interesting things. Perhaps you hear sounds you don't normally notice. The clock ticking, the wind outside, birds, the sound of your own breathing. Or perhaps you notice thoughts and feelings that were being drowned out by the hustle and bustle of everyday life. This simple exercise can bring clarity, alleviate anxiety, and help organize emotions. It costs nothing and can bring so much. It's like giving yourself a gift, the gift of pause, mental rest, and inner reconnection. And returning to relationships, how about proposing to someone close to you that you spend some time together in silence? It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It can be while you're sipping coffee, faith while watching the sunset, while sitting on the couch, just being there together without the obligation to fill the time with conversation. You'll see how intimate this can be, how it can create a different, deeper connection, how liberating it can be to not have to constantly entertain or be entertained. The best relationships are those where silence is comfortable, where there's no pressure to always have something interesting to talk about, where simply being together is enough. And to conclude our conversation today, I want to leave you with a thought. Silence is not the enemy of communication. it's an essential part of it. Just as the pauses between notes are essential for a song to make sense, the silences between words are essential for a conversation to have depth. Learn to value your silences. Learn to respect the silences of others. Learn to use silence to your advantage as a tool for self-knowledge, protection, connection, and wisdom. And now one last question for you to think about, and if you'd like, share in the comments. What was the most important silence in your life? The one that changed something, that taught you something, that truly left a mark? It could be your own silence or that of someone close to you. It could be a short or long silence. But what was the one that stuck in your memory? Think about it. And after thinking, allow yourself a few minutes of silence. Real silence. Turn off whatever's making noise around you. Take a deep breath and just feel, because in the end, perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this. Not everything needs to be said to be understood. Not everything needs to be explained to make sense. And not everything needs words to be deeply true. Silence is there. It always has been. It always will be. You just have to allow yourself to hear it. You know, there's something about silence that's rarely mentioned. It holds secrets that even we ourselves don't know we have. It's curious to think about how many times have you been silent and suddenly an old memory surfaced. Something you didn't even remember existed inside you, stored in some forgotten corner of your mind. Silence has this archaeological power. It excavates. It delves deep into the layers of our personal history and brings to the surface fragments we thought were lost. A conversation with a loved one who is no longer here. The smell of a meal your mother made. The feeling of holding someone's hand for the first time. The fear you felt at a certain moment and never told anyone. These memories don't come when we're busy, when we're talking, when we're distracted. They need silence to surface. They need space. And when they do, they bring with them not just images, but entire emotions. You don't just remember them, you feel them again. And here comes an interesting question. Why do we run away from these memories so much? Why do we fill our days with so much noise that we don't give them a chance to surface? Is it fear? Are we afraid of what we'll find when we delve too deeply into ourselves? Maybe so, because not every memory is pleasant. Not every stored feeling is light. Some things we carry are heavy, painful, difficult to face. And silence, by bringing these things to the surface, forces us to deal with them. You can't pretend they don't exist when they're right there, right in front of you, begging for attention. But do you know what I've discovered over time? That facing these memories and feelings, no matter how painful, is liberating. Because while they're kept hidden, denied, they continue to weigh heavily. They continue to influence our choices, our relationships, our way of seeing the world. They control us without us realizing it. When we bring these things into conscious silence, when we allow them to surface and face them head-on, something changes. Not that the pain disappears completely. Some pains are eternal, but our relationship with it changes. It stops being that monster in the closet that terrifies us precisely because we don't look at it. It becomes something that is part of us, that shaped who we are, but that no longer needs to dominate us. Have you ever made peace with a painful memory through silence? Have you ever had that moment when you finally looked at something that had been hurting for years and realized you could survive that pain, that you could even learn from it? Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about silence at different stages of life. Because the silence of a child is not the same as the silence of a young person, which is not the same as the silence of someone older. Each stage has its own silences, with different textures and meanings. When we're children, silence is often forced. Be quiet. Don't interrupt adults. Children shouldn't give their opinions. We learn early on that our voice isn't always welcome, that there's a time to speak and a time to be silent. And sometimes we learn this traumatically, through scolding, humiliation, or being ignored when we tried to express something important. These experiences leave their mark. They shape how we relate to silence for the rest of our lives. Some people grow up to be overly talkative, as if compensating for all those years of being forced to be quiet. And others carry this imposed silence as a habit, struggling to express themselves, even as adults who have every right to speak. Do you identify with any of these paths? Looking back on your childhood, what was your relationship with silence like? Was it something natural or something imposed on you? And how did this affect the person you became? In adolescence and young adulthood, silence takes on other colors. It's the time when we want to be heard, when we have so much to say, so many opinions forming, so much energy wanting to escape. But at the same time, it's also a time of insecurities, of fear of not fitting in, of saying the wrong thing and being ridiculed. How many of us remained silent in our youth, not because we had nothing to say, but because we were afraid of others' reactions? How many times did we swallow words, swallow opinions, and swallow feelings because we didn't want to seem silly or different or inadequate? And then when we reach adulthood, halfway through our journey, silence changes again. It becomes a strategy. We learn that it's not always worth saying everything we think. That sometimes it's better to observe, calculate, wait for the right moment. Silence ceases to be just an absence of words and becomes a survival tool in the complex world of relationships, work, and responsibilities. But it comes at a price too. Sometimes we become so good at strategically remaining silent that we end up remaining silent even when we should speak. We end up missing opportunities to say, "I love you," "I'm proud of you," "I'm sorry," "I need help." Important words that get stuck because we've become too accustomed to calculated silence, and then we reach maturity, that stage of life that many of you listening to me now are in. And the silence here takes on a different quality. It's no longer the forced silence of childhood, nor the insecure silence of youth, nor the strategic silence of a busy adult life. It's a wiser silence, more chosen, more conscious. It's the silence of someone who has said a lot, listened a lot, made many mistakes, and gotten many things right. It's the silence of someone who knows that words carry weight, and that sometimes saying nothing is the most powerful decision we can make. But this silence of maturity can also bring loneliness, especially when the people around us begin to leave. When lifelong friends depart, when the partner of so many years is no longer there to share the comfortable silences of the late afternoon. As children grow up and build their own lives, the house that was once full of voices and noises becomes quieter. This silence can weigh. It can hurt. It can make us feel invisible, forgotten, as if our voice no longer matters. And here something fundamental comes into play: the difference between chosen silence and silence imposed by circumstances. Chosen silence is liberating. Imposed silence can be suffocating, and part of the wisdom of this phase of life is learning to transform one into the other. It's learning to find peace and meaning even when circumstances bring us more loneliness than we'd like. How do I do this? I don't have a magic formula. Each person finds their own path. But I can share some things I've seen work for people I admire. First, cultivate your own company. Learn to enjoy being by yourself, to have rich internal conversations, to not always depend on external voices to feel alive. This doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means being comfortable alone, so you can also be comfortable with company. Second, seek genuine connections, even if they are few. Quality matters much more than quantity. A true friend with whom you can share comfortable silences is worth more than 10 acquaintances with whom you have to struggle to maintain a conversation. Third, speak up when necessary. Just because we're older doesn't mean we should accept being silenced. Your experience, your wisdom, your story matter. And if someone doesn't want to listen, look for someone who will. There's always someone who can benefit from what you have to share. And then there's the silence of nature, which is something many rediscover at this stage of life. Have you ever noticed how silence in nature is different from silence indoors? How? Does it have textures, layers, life? When you sit in a garden, in a square near a tree, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of natural sounds. The wind in the leaves, birds talking to each other, insects working, the earth breathing, if I may say so. This natural silence has a calming effect that urban silence lacks, perhaps because it reconnects us with something deeper, older, truer. It reminds us that we are part of something greater, that our individual story is just a thread in a vast tapestry. Do you often seek out these natural silences? Is there a place that's your refuge, where you can go to simply be unhurried without obligation, just feeling the world unfold around you? And since we're talking about nature, there's the silence of the seasons. Each time of year has its own silence. The silence of summer, warm and vibrant, full of cicadas and pulsating life. The silence of autumn with its falling leaves, a silence of transition, of preparation. The silence of winter, more closed, more introspective, as if nature itself were meditating. And the silence of spring, full of promise, of beginnings, of life blossoming again. Notice how these changes are reflected in us. How our inner silences also have seasons. There are times when we are more expansive, more talkative, more connected to the outside world. And there are times when we retreat, when we need more silence, more introspection, more time alone with our thoughts. And that's okay. We don't have to always be the same. Life is made of cycles, of comings and goings, of moments to speak and moments to remain silent. The important thing is to respect these cycles in ourselves and in others. Now let's talk about something that may be delicate, but important: silence in the face of death. Not as something morbid, but as a natural part of life that we will all face. There is a special silence that surrounds this topic. A reverent, respectful silence, often fraught with fear or denial. Our society doesn't deal well with death. We avoid talking about it. We avoid thinking about it. And when we are forced to face it, we often don't know what to say. But silence in these moments can be the greatest gesture of humanity. When someone is leaving, when someone is grieving, when we are faced with the ultimate mystery of existence, words often fail us. And that's okay. The silence there isn't empty. It's filled with everything that cannot be expressed in human language. Have you ever been by someone's side in their final moments, or accompanied someone in mourning? If so, you've probably felt how dense, profound, almost sacred the silence in these moments is. It doesn't need to be filled, it just needs to be present in it. And there's also the silence of forgiveness. This is powerful and transformative. When someone hurts us, when we are the ones who hurt someone, the path to reconciliation often passes through an initial silence. It's not the silence of indifference, it's the silence of processing. It's about giving time for anger to cool, for pain to be felt and understood, for pride to subside and compassion to emerge. Without this silence, without this pause, forgiveness rarely happens genuinely. How many relationships could have been saved if people had made room for this silence instead of trying to resolve everything immediately in the heat of the moment? How many fights that lasted for years started precisely because no one wanted to give in and remain silent for a while? Silence heals. Not always immediately, not always completely, but it heals. It gives time for wounds to heal, for perspectives to shift, for us to see the situation from a different angle. And when we finally speak again, after this necessary silence, the words come out different, more thoughtful, kinder, more truthful. Another fascinating aspect is the silence of creativity. Artists, writers, musicians all talk about the importance of silence in their creative processes. It's in silence that ideas are born. It's in silence that inspiration visits. You don't have to be a professional artist to experience this. Anyone who's ever had a good idea knows that it rarely appears amidst the noise. It appears in the shower, on a quiet walk, in that moment before bed when everything is quiet. It appears precisely because in silence, our minds have space to make connections that noise prevents. If you have something to resolve, a problem to solve, a decision to make, try giving it silence. Don't dwell on it obsessively, but also don't try to solve everything by talking to 1,000 different people. Give it space. Let the question rest in the silence. You'll be surprised by the answers that emerge, and there's the silence of gratitude. You know that moment when something so good happens that you couldn't help it? Can't even speak, when the emotion is so overwhelming that words seem too small, insufficient to express what you feel. This silence is precious. It's the silence of someone fully present in a moment of grace, of beauty, of profound connection with life. It could be holding a grandchild for the first time. It could be watching a spectacular sunset. It could be receiving an unexpected gesture of love from a loved one. In these moments, speaking even seems disrespectful. Silence is the only appropriate response. It's as if we recognize that we are before something greater than ourselves, something that deserves only our full presence, our complete attention, our open heart. Have you ever experienced one of these moments? Have you felt that silent gratitude that fills your chest and brings tears to your eyes? Treasure these moments. They are treasures. They are reminders that life, despite everything, is beautiful and worthwhile. Speaking of treasures, there's the silence of non-verbal teachings. Have you ever learned something important from someone without them saying a word? Just by observing, just by being close, just by seeing how she acts, how she reacts, how she lives? Some of the greatest lessons we receive in life come this way. They come from the mother who works tirelessly without complaining, from the father who maintains his dignity even in the face of difficulties, from the grandfather who faces old age with grace and good humor, From the grandmother who cares for everyone without expecting recognition. These people teach through exemplary silence, and these lessons sink deeper than any sermon, because they are lived, not just spoken. They are authentic. They are truth embodied. And now you. What silent lessons are you passing on to the people around you? Your children, grandchildren, neighbors, younger friends. What do they learn just by observing how you live, how you treat people, how you face challenges? Because whether you speak or not, whether you realize it or not, you are teaching. Your life is a message. Your silence speaks as much as your words. And perhaps in the end, this is the most important legacy any of us leaves. Not what we said, but how we lived. Thinking about it, all this talk about silence leads us to an interesting conclusion. Silence is not the opposite of communication. It is an essential part of it. It is one of the instruments in the orchestra of life. And knowing when to play and when to pause, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to fill and when to leave empty, that is art. It is wisdom gained over time, through mistakes, through successes, through life lived. So, instead of fearing silence, how about embracing it? Instead of running away from it, how about exploring it? Seeing what it has to teach, to reveal, to heal. Because in the end, silence is one of the few companions that will never abandon us. It was there when we came into this world. It will be there when we leave, and it is here now, between every word I say and you hear. It is a constant, faithful presence, full of possibilities. It is up to us to decide what kind of relationship we want to have with it.